On August 28, 2003, a man walked into a bank in Erie, Pennsylvania, with a bomb locked around his neck. He handed the teller a note demanding $250,000. What followed was a real-life heist story so twisted, so absurd, the truth is still being debated about between criminologists 20-plus years later. This is the story of Brian Wells and the pizza bomber case, a case involving a collar bomb, a scavenger hunt, a hoarder with a PhD, and a frozen body in a freezer. The deeper investigators dug, the more it felt like reality itself was breaking down. Brian Wells was a 46-year-old pizza delivery man for Mamma Mia's Pizzeria. That afternoon, he received a call to deliver 2 pizzas to a strange location, a TV transmission tower on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a normal delivery address. It was remote, surrounded by trees and eerily quiet. What happened next is still unclear. Some say Wells was lured. Others believe he knew more than he let on. But sometime shortly after arriving, Wells was overpowered by 3 men. A bulky metal collar was locked around his neck and a bomb was attached to it. The device was complex, a thick, hand-welded collar locked with 4 keyholes. Attached to it was a boxy device resembling a large handcuff timer, loaded with circuitry, wires, a digital countdown, and decoy components. Built-in fail-safes ensured that tampering would trigger detonation. Investigators later described it as one of the most sophisticated improvised explosive devices they'd ever encountered. Wells was also handed a 9-page letter filled with instructions for a scavenger hunt that would supposedly lead to the removal of the device. The instructions were clear: rob the PNC Bank, follow a sequence of timed clues around town, and collect keys that would supposedly delay the timer or disarm the bomb. At 2:30 p.m., Wells walked into the bank wearing the bomb and holding what looked like a cane, but was in fact a homemade shotgun fashioned to appear harmless. He handed the teller one of the pages. He asked for $250,000. She gave him just over $8,000, the maximum she could access from the drawer. Wells calmly exited the bank and proceeded to the first clue, at a nearby McDonald's. He retrieved a note hidden under a rock near a sign. He got back into his car, but his time was running out. At 3:04 p.m., police intercepted Wells in a parking lot. Dash cam footage captured the bizarre and tragic scene. Wells sat on the pavement, handcuffed, nervously pleading for help with a bomb collar strapped on his neck. "It's going to go off," he told them. "I'm not lying." At 3:18 p.m., the device began beeping. Police backed away. Seconds later, it exploded. Brian Wells was thrown backward and died within minutes. The public was in shock. News footage of a man exploding on a city street aired across the country. Many believed Wells was an innocent man, coerced into a horrifying situation. Others weren't so sure. Investigators combed through the scene. The bomb itself was unlike anything seen before. It contained multiple power sources, decoy circuits, and redundant triggers. Parts of it were encased in clay and epoxy to resist dismantling. But what made the case even more chilling was the 9-page letter Wells had been carrying, the so-called instructions. The letter detailed an elaborate, almost theatrical scavenger hunt that would supposedly lead Wells to safety. Each step had strict time limits, exact driving directions, warnings not to contact law enforcement, and statements claiming the bomb could be delayed with the right keys. The notes described a world of escalating threats. One wrong move, one delay, and certain death was promised. At first glance, it seemed like a logical path to freedom. If Wells followed every step, he could supposedly unlock the collar. But as the FBI retraced the steps, they discovered something far more disturbing. Yes, there were locations marked. One clue was at a McDonald's, another at a wooded area, and so on. Containers had been planted, each holding new instructions. But when agents tried to follow the full route, they realized the timeline was impossible. Not only was there not enough time to complete the scavenger hunt before detonation, but some clues contradicted each other or were incomplete. One location had no key. Another required information from a previous stop that had been tampered with. And most damning of all, even if Wells had managed to gather every clue and follow every direction perfectly, the bomb's fail-safes would have still triggered, exploding and killing Wells. There was no actual way to disarm it. This raised a chilling possibility that Brian Wells was never meant to survive, that the instructions were just a cruel psychological manipulation intended to make him believe he had control. But was he a complete victim, or did he know more than he let on? Months later, after police struggled to grasp the case and come up with a theory, a break came from an unexpected place. A man named Bill Rothstein called police and led them to his garage freezer. Inside was a decomposing body. It belonged to James Roden, the boyfriend of Rothstein's ex-girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong. At first, police didn't think these cases were related, but then police realized that the two crime scenes were just meters away. Rothstein knew the close distance of the crime scenes was suspicious, but he claimed that he had nothing to do with the murder and was merely helping Marjorie. But inconsistencies in his story quickly made him a suspicious figure. Marjorie had a long history of erratic, often violent behavior. She was brilliant, a former top student with a master's degree, but deeply mentally ill. Furthermore, Deal Armstrong had previously been accused of killing two former boyfriends and had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. Rothstein, meanwhile, was a handyman and part-time teacher with an extraordinary IQ and a knack for engineering. Rothstein was known for his manipulative intelligence, and his home was filled with strange devices and meticulous journals. Both Deal Armstrong and Rothstein were fiercely controlling, and both saw themselves as smarter than the law. The body was only the beginning. Investigators soon uncovered connections between Rothstein, Deal Armstrong, and a third man, Kenneth Barnes, a drug dealer. According to Barnes, Marjorie wanted her father dead. He had money, and she wanted the inheritance, but she needed cash to hire a hitman, and that's where the bank robbery came in. Barnes told the FBI that the bank plot was Marjorie's idea, a desperate way to quickly gather enough money to fund her murder-for-hire scheme. He also claimed that Wells had been recruited but was lied to and didn't know the full plan. The plan was simple in concept but horrifying in execution. Force someone to rob a bank wearing a real bomb under the belief they were part of a game. Enter Brian Wells. Text messages and phone records proved that Wells had been in contact with Rothstein and Barnes. He had reportedly been approached days earlier and told he'd be part of a robbery plot. Some accounts suggest he agreed but was told the bomb would be fake. The horrifying twist, according to investigators, after Wells was fitted with the bomb, he realized the truth. It was real. He panicked, but by then, there was no turning back. In 2007, the FBI indicted Marjorie Deal Armstrong and Kenneth Barnes for the pizza bomber plot. Bill Rothstein had died of cancer in 2004, escaping trial but not suspicion. In court, Marjorie was erratic. She ranted, interrupted attorneys, and accused everyone of conspiring against her. But the evidence was insurmountable. Rothstein's freezer, her admissions, and Barnes's testimony. She was convicted in 2010 and sentenced to life in prison. She died in 2017. Kenneth Barnes pleaded guilty and received 45 years. He cooperated fully, laying out the plan in detail. The FBI ultimately concluded that Brian Wells was not entirely innocent. He was considered a co-conspirator, a man who thought he was part of a fake robbery, unaware of just how deadly the plan truly was. But many continue to believe he was an unwitting pawn, that his final moments, begging for help, prove he didn't know the truth until it was too late. The pizza bomber case remains one of the most bizarre and haunting crimes in modern American history. It raised uncomfortable questions about manipulation, mental illness, and justice. Could Wells have stopped it? Did law enforcement overlook signs? How many others were involved? There are still pieces missing, details hidden by death or silence. But one thing is certain: Brian Wells was at the center of a cruel, calculated plot. Whether willing or unwilling, he became the face of a crime unlike anything the FBI had seen.